Toot. Welcome everyone. Mimmortal's Meandering session. We've got Kyron here on this side.
On the other side.
And we are out in the park. Deep conversations with a lighthearted touch. Focus on the lighthearted for meandering sessions. Rapid fire topics. I actually got a nice little comment from Faraz the other day saying, man, I really enjoyed the varying of the topics. So
I did see that comment.
Good to know that that is coming through. I'm just going to get into my first point, which if I had prepped properly, I would have had my things up. All right. Have you heard of Proust? Do you know who Marcel Proust is?
Marcel Proust.
Proust, maybe. I'm not sure how you...
I don't know. The name's not ringing bells.
So he wrote this book, and I've been meaning to try it out for a while, but it's called something about time. Lost in Time, maybe? Let me bring it up. And it's...
Fiction or non-fiction?
I believe it's fiction, and so he's a French novelist, and In Search of Lost Time. That's what it's called.
In Search of Lost Time.
And the book, I believe, is like one of the biggest books ever written. It's huge.
I think like the thickest
it's just
book.
Like volume, like there's volumes to it, sort of thing. And I believe it's like a man's journey through. It's almost like the lifetime of a man or something, and it's just related to time, and it's French, so it's like all the artsy and shit like that. Anyway, he's got He had this quote which I took from another book, which was about the only true voyage. So, the real voyage of discovery. So let me bring this quote up. The only true voyage would not be to travel through 100 different lands, but to see the same land through 100 different pair of eyes. So he was, and that came up, and I was like, oh. That's kind of an interesting one. I haven't heard that before, which is, instead of looking and experiencing different varying parts of the world, going to Ireland and then Switzerland and comparing things like that, it would be to be in the same place and to have that same place but see it through the eyes of, a young child, a man, like an elderly woman, a gay guy or something like that. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's kind of interesting, and it got me thinking about... I think at the same time I was thinking about education, and it also got me thinking, would it be better, and then this is slightly tenuous, but the thought that arose, would it be better if instead of having multiple different teachers throughout your whole, primary school, high school grading, would it be better to have, one teacher sort of going through with you the whole time, and having, just forming a relationship with one teacher that would last your entire schooling career? What do you reckon about that? You reckon that would work out well or bad?
I think it would work out both. I think it would work out good and bad. In similar, say, when you said that quote as well, I went, I can see the goods and I can see the bads of that same quote as well. I think I'll start with the bad. What would be the bad thing? Well, if you get, let's say, a really terrible teacher that you have for your whole entire, childhood or whatever, well then, woes on you. You're going to get some shit teaching and you have a shit interaction. Now, let's say it's a really good teacher. Even if it is a really good teacher and you've got them for the entire time, I still think the bad aspect is you don't then learn other aspects around integrating and having conversations with different individuals, right? Like learning from different people. Maybe they teach in different ways, right? Like in the quote, the bit that not irked me, but I went, sure, but say that teacher, they're going to teach you the whole time. And maybe they will change up the style or the mode of teaching, but still it's going to come from a particular viewpoint, a particular experience of an individual. I think the bad thing is, you'll lose out on all these different experiences from other teachers that you might not have seen. The good thing though is, of course, if you do get a good teacher and you do integrate really well, and if for some reason that particular teacher also you learn really well from, then I think you could learn a hell of a lot of things way better. So I know examples of someone at the moment going through the MBA, and they were saying, even the teacher was really terrible, but they did some tutoring, and then the tutoring teacher, in essence, was able to teach them so much better. Now, so if you had someone like that for your entire, schooling or everything you're trying to learn, and you can learn really well, then you would pick up a lot of things much better than maybe alternative you would. So I can see some good stuff, I can see some bad stuff.
Yeah, so why this came up was because I was thinking of tutors of yesteryear. So you know, back in the 1800s, if you're a rich lord or something, you'd get a tutor and they would stay with your child, I guess, for almost for life, and they would be like, you know, it would almost be like if you were even more from the adult's point of view, you could get to see the same sort of things but through the child's eyes, because the child is almost becoming a different person each year. Like, you can really see the differences between a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old rather than a 33-year-old and a 35-year-old. So I was sort of thinking, you know, it could also be good for the teachers. That was why this ended up coming up, like seeing the same land through 100 different pairs of eyes. That's sort of what it would be like to be a tutor of one single kid. You could see their progression, I guess, over a decade, or how long to schooling? 12 years here in Australia. You could see I would say, like, almost learn more about life through all those different...
yeah, I mean, I would disagree. I disagree with the quote in part, and I disagree with that in part, along the lines of, yes, you would get to experience life through the different lens, especially if you're, like, say, looking after a kid for, say, 30 years or 25 years, something like that, and so you get to see the difference in evolution. But is it more variability and more of life or more experience that you get from, say, teaching, I don't know, 100 different kids or 200 different kids at a time? I would probably tend to go towards no. Like, I don't think that the rate of changes and variability and learnings you find in, like, the one individual over that time, I don't know if it compares to if you taught lots and lots and lots of different kids. I think similarly, like, as I was thinking in the quote, I was like, yes, like, say you stay in Brisbane and you inspect Brisbane from all different viewpoints, like pretend you're a kid or see it as if you were, you know, a homeless person. Yes, you will definitely get to experience and understand Brisbane, like, absolutely fully, and other viewpoints as well. But is it comparable to going to all these different places around the world and then getting a completely different view of the world, I guess? Like, there's not... You get a view of maybe characters or people in that particular quote, but there's a whole host of other things that you miss out because you're not seeing everything else. And in turn, in seeing everything else, you actually could stumble upon some of those viewpoints that you would have stumbled upon here as well. So I go...
Well, this is, I guess, getting back to... I'm surprised I'm even bringing this up, but in Dubliners, the James Joyce book, which I didn't like. It was such a nothing book to me. But one of the points he was making about that book was... It was essentially similar to this. It was all centered in Dublin. I think there was 12, 13 stories in total. But it was told through, you know, an abusive family, a young child playing hooky, you know, varying different maid and stuff like that. And he was saying, you know, all cities in the world are roughly the same. You just need to, you know, dive deep into it to be able to see it. And so that would sort of be like the counterpoint, which is, you know, do you really need to go see all the different cities in the world because you could just, you know, potentially see Brisbane and you would get aspects of all the other cities in the world. You could find, you know, the seedy nightlife, where the strange people hang out, where the bad people hang out, what it's like in the evening under certain conditions, things like that. The other thing, just getting back to the kids one, I was sort of imagining, what about a system where it's if you don't like your teacher, you know, at the start, you can sort of switch a little bit. I don't know about you, but there was maybe 2 teachers in my high schooling, primary school career where I was like, yeah, they knew how to teach me and I enjoyed being in their classes and whatnot. And it wouldn't even need to be related to the particular subject they were speaking. It was teaching. It was more their style. And, you know, the argument could be made, but, you know, an English teacher is really the only one suited to teaching English. That's where I'd probably go, no, I think the English teacher, like a general all-round teacher, would maybe, you know, you're teaching kids. It needs to be basic. It doesn't need to be the most technical.
Correct, yeah.
Best way to teach it. I would argue... I wonder if I would be more well-rounded and have a better understanding of topics if I just had one teacher who I enjoyed being around, who knew how to teach me in particular, and not just me, but like a class full of maybe people similar to me, or who also enjoyed hanging out with that teacher.
Yeah, and I think
and going on.
I think that was my argument there of like, yeah, that's the benefit. I think because I agree. I can remember a primary school teacher who, like, I really enjoyed being taught by. They also, like, promoted me to go do, like, events and activities that supported me, like, learning and whatnot. And I went, oh, that would be, if she was, like, an all-purpose teacher, and I could have kept that teacher for, like, to teach me chemistry and physics. Now, could you really have a teacher that knows, like, absolutely everything that they want to teach you, like, broadly, like physics? So, because here's the other thing. So I think in theory, yes, it does sound good. But what's a really great teacher, right? A really great teacher, or to teach somebody, is when you know a particular field or experience so well that you can teach it very simply. I'd struggle to see a good teacher that would be able to teach somebody physics, chemistry, English, social sciences, IT, to the point that, oh, they're really well-versed and it can explain it really simply. I think you'd have a bit of an average learning experience, but you'd have an enjoyable experience. Like, you would absorb all of the average information that comes your way, as opposed to the more maybe precise, well-versed, particular individual who would be, like, really good at physics, right? I think if you got taught physics by, let's just say, someone like a Lex Friedman, like, if Lex Friedman was a teacher, and I feel like he could be a teacher, and he somehow taught you, I'd be like, that's like someone I would want to hear or listen. I feel like he could teach you a lot of stuff. Now, if you listen to someone who kind of knew a little bit about physics, like they'd read about it, and they could just go along with you, I think you'd learn a lot of it, but maybe there'd be some interest beyond and above that you wouldn't get into or something like that. But I think the positive for sure is that I think everything that you would be taught, you would absorb a lot better. Because there's a lot, I remember there's definitely a lot of teachers in high school where I was, probably not as intrinsically listening because of, like, who they were and that they were. I was more like, I'm concerned of just like just chatting with friends at this point and just doing enough so you can pass and do well. Yeah. But not for I'm going to do this because I really enjoy the content that's coming through.
Yeah. Or maybe even having, instead of just one teacher, a suite of teachers who travels with you. I guess the aspect that I'm getting at is how useful would it be to have people who just know you well going through, and so then the more understanding is, like, this topic I can convey to them. Maybe I don't have the ultra high depth knowledge, but I know how to teach this one particular kid, and so the trade-off would work in the favor of the kid would at least understand the basics.
Yes, I still agree that it would be probably better, but some things, like, pinging around my brain being like, that sounds too theoretical. So, like, I'm bringing it back to practicality. Like, if a mere mortal out there was like, oh, that was really good, what happens when you start a university degree? You got to get taught by somebody else, and it's not the person that's been teaching you all the time, and they do it completely different, or they're really angry at you or something else, and you almost can't cope because you're like, oh, crap, I've been taught for 20 years in this exact way by this person. Now this person's, like, angry, but it's the only one that's going to teach me. Would you have more of a fragility to, like, just fail apart and be like, oh, nah, it's not my teacher, I'm not going to do it? Maybe not.
I would argue then the difference is that's a voluntary choice. So, you don't get a choice of going through grades 1 through 12 or 1 through 10. You have to do it. Whereas that one, it's more like, okay, you're taking a new step. You want to progress more beyond. Okay, well, you'll have to face the challenges that arise from that anyway. Also related to this topic, just on teaching, I should probably actually ask my parents about if that's a good idea or not, because they'd probably have some practical knowledge. That they were former teachers. The other one is, I was just finished reading a book, The Social Leap by William von Hippel, and especially an evolutionary book. And it was a nice refresher for me. It's been a while since I've dove deep into that topic. I used to read a lot of, like, The Red Queen by Matt Ridley, a couple of Richard Dawkins books.
Like social science stuff.
So, no, more evolutionary theory. I don't know, is that social science? I don't think that's social science.
Maybe
not. No. And anywho, it got me thinking, like, you know what? I think this is probably, like, one of the 10 things that are super useful for me to know, to understand, because it's really good at examining myself, and I'll bring up another point related to this a little bit later. But if you could pick, like, 10 things that are sort of, like, the most basic knowledge that you think is super useful to have, what would they be?
10?
Yeah. Or 5 if you want to go with that.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like mathematics to be able to do basic budgeting. I think that's like the huge point. Like mathematics, I don't really use it for too many other things, really. Other than, at least in my day-to-day life, it's like basic budgeting, or, it'll take me 2 hours. Well, not even like driving anymore, because you just have a map. It's like, how long does it take to get from here to here?
Yeah, you don't have to worry about
it's
it.
2 hours, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'd probably say I would put maths in there, for sure. So like, that alongside like basic understanding of, growth and money and investment and la la la. So I think that obviously comes in handy. I'd want to say that one of the most important things should be like, although we're not very much attuned to that as humans, but like statistics, even when it comes to mathematics. But like I wish we would apply it more, but we don't. So I'll probably take it out as like the most helpful things. But it would be like a nice thing if a lot of humans were, if mathematics also included like statistics as part of it as well. I think another thing that would be...
How would you include that in your day-to-day life?
We don't as humans, but to...
So I'm talking more about you personally, rather than broad sweeping.
So I'll say maths in general. I'll say like just language as a basic, just being able to communicate, like the communication style. So would you put that as language or would you put that as communication? Either or, bucket them to the same thing, just being able to like have a conversation. I guess I would have to like. Would you say emotional? Like an emotional IQ would be something that you would term as like a topic of knowledge?
Well, if you know how to apply it. So for me, I guess that would be sort of game in a way. Like learning about game was really great for knowing about, because it encompasses so many things. Physical body language. If this person is, tilting away, or if they're sort of hunched over, this is an indication that they might be thinking or feeling this. If this person, is scratching their nose, doing these things, that means they're uncomfortable. If you say this sort of thing, like a backhanded compliment, you can get this sort of reaction.
So I'd say something like emotional IQ would be also an important thing. I can't really... I'm sure there's like lots more that are floating around my brain, but I can't specifically say like, oh, what's the topic? Like, what's some other examples that you would have?
I'm late to the game, but language, and in particular, learning the structure of languages, that's been pretty enlightening for me, because it's really gotten me...
So, but you're saying it's enlightening or actually useful to you?
Well, both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why are you finding it useful?
Well, because I can speak another language.
But why is that useful?
So I can... that's going too deep.
Okay.
We don't need to go that deep. It's there's all sort of associated benefits, but it's asking the why questions too much doesn't help in this case.
Well, like, cause I think some people will say like with the maths, it's like why is it actually useful? Like you say like, oh, we're budgeting and whatnot, but someone could be like, well, you could just get like somebody to do it for you, or like someone could you use like a software that'll do all that sort of stuff for you, which I kind of go.
Once again, this is related to me. Like I don't. This isn't broad sweeping. This is just stuff I care about. So like the why, I could explain, but
so you reckon? So you put language or learning languages or the structure of languages,
like the structure of a language, and
as like the top 5 thing of knowledge to know.
I think it's pretty useful.
Okay.
Yeah.
But actually, so my question to you, like I think I'm asking because I don't know why it's useful. Like I think to you saying you're useful, but I can't understand why it's useful.
Because it helps me understand how my own brain works in a way. So when I think in English, it's different than when I think in Spanish. So it's useful to understand like, oh, I can be a different person depending on just the language itself. So if I'm using Spanish, I'm new ideas and new ways of thinking can occur.
Okay.
And that's based on like the structure of the language. You form words, you think in this different way, and it's I would say like different pathways are connected.
Could you give an example? Cause I'm looking at a person, I'd be like, man, I can't, like, I don't have an experience. So
here's one in particular. There's no word to say. Is it to lend in Spanish. Like you can't. So you can say like I borrow in English, or I lend. Like I'm lending you money. I'm borrowing money from you. In Spanish, there's only one word, prestar, and so.
Well, you could say yo le di, which I gave you.
Doesn't have the same
that would
context.
be the word that I would, like, in my understanding, I would say yo le di as like that. I lent you that.
Exactly, and that's not the same.
Yeah,
it's
not the direct translation.
Yeah, and so with prestar, you can say like me prestó, so like he lent it to me, or there's the vice versa of like le presté or whatever it is, which was like I lent it to him or something. And I find it useful then in that context, which is like, okay, the emphasis is always on the lender or the lending, and not on the borrowing aspect. And so you could go down all sorts of fun routes, being like, how does that translate into more of a giving culture or more of a spending culture or things like that. So
you find that useful to you, like in what way? Like it is good. Like it is good to know that. And I'm just thinking, because in my mind, to give you an example for like languages, I mean, Russian would be a cool language to know, and in my mind, the usefulness comes from there are books that have been translated from Russian that I would love to know from the actual direct text. I go like that would be my usefulness. Like why would I think that there is a chance that you lose meaning between the translation? Yeah, between the initial translation. So for me, I'm like, that I would see usefulness in a language and knowing the language at the core. I also think that if you don't truly know the language, you don't truly know the culture, because you don't understand all those concepts behind, like, a word might be said this way and it translated kind of directly like this, but it might mean like a hell of a difference if it's in Argentina, in Colombia, or like any other country. Like it is, and for that I go, it's useful to know languages as a structure for knowing cultures and like truly. For me, I went, I wouldn't consider that a top 5 thing. Maybe because
once again, this is for me. Like I don't care if you don't.
But because you haven't mentioned like that as usefulness, that's why I was like, what is the usefulness beyond that?
I could list out 20 if you really want me to.
What's another one? Because I reckon I struggle. Like I feel like I almost have like a disdain to learn more languages because I don't know the usefulness.
You connect with. Well, you gave that one yourself. You connect with people all across the world. It's a task, a hard thing to do, so it keeps you like focused and motivated. I can connect with people here in Brisbane, obviously. It's a status thing as well, so if I can speak blah 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 languages, people are like, oh my god. So utility wise, you can chuck all those. You can add in jobs if you want, like increase job opportunities. The list goes on.
Okay. I think like all of those, I think I hear you. I do hear with them. And I would be interested, actually, if any mere mortalites want to comment on this one. Because for me, like, when I hear all that, I have, like, a corresponding argument of why, like, that doesn't apply to just languages, and why, like, that doesn't sound useful. But I agree. And that's where I think I miss the point where a lot of people with languages aspire to learn more languages. I just think that there's maybe a few things where some people do find it really interesting, where I'm like, I can't pair the interesting to the usefulness. And I go, I couldn't see myself doing that. Here's another question, actually. Say, imagine fast forward 20 years. You have a kid. Would you feel that also it would be a very important thing for your kid, as like a top 5 thing, to know different languages?
I'm teaching my kids. They'll be bilingual.
Yeah.
Yes.
So more, just bilingual or more than bilingual, you reckon? Like, would you find it an encouraging thing to be like, I will, how would I term it? Let's just say something that's not in your top 5. Let's say it was like, I don't know, molecular biology or something like that.
Depends on the kid, man. Depends on the kid.
If they wanted to like know more, okay.
Yeah. I'm not forcing my top 5 on anyone else. If they
but
don't
you
want
would
to,
want
that's
them to
fine.
be bilingual.
I'd definitely use that strategy for sure. All sorts of. I think the data's in that being bilingual as a youngster
it's a good thing.
Is more beneficial than harmful.
And what languages would you reckon?
Well, obviously English, because that's my native, and this is where it'd be like nice to have someone who's native in another language with also good English.
Oh, okay. So you wouldn't really care what sort of language it would be?
Not particularly. No.
Okay.
No. I don't think the the language matters, just as long as they're not picking up too bad habits, which they'd get some bad habits from me. I'd still argue that the benefits would still be there, but my Spanish isn't perfect, and it probably will never be perfect. So I'm not willing to live in Spain for 6 years to perfect it.
Well, I just wonder if there's people out there. I don't know if you've come across anybody who, like, from a language perspective, they would be like, yeah, I want my kid to learn, like, the two most spoken languages, and if that would be like Mandarin and English, just like, yep, that's what I'm going to get them to learn, and I'm going to learn that too. So it's like as many people as you can talk as possible from a statistics perspective, like a numbers perspective.
Yeah. Maybe.
I would say that for sure there's somebody out there who would speak like that, like would wanna, but
for sure. But there's all, like, me personally, I like the languages where you can use them in a lot of different places. I think that's pretty cool, and also high up there on, like, the usefulness level. But yeah, enforcing that on like a kid or something could be...
I need third party memo lights here to send comments about the conversation here.
Let's do one of your top 5, and I'll rip it to shreds as well.
It's an interesting... I can't even think of like another top 5 thing. So I'm not harnessing the concept of how like little it would be, but I would want to hear a boostergram from somebody like around the pros and the cons of usefulness of extra language, because I think you can get like really hectic on like how much of a waste of time it could be, and how much of a positive thing it could be. Like I think you always like you can fall like very easily not in the middle of this conversation.
Remember, people, this is a guy playing Agario, and what's your new game?
Well, that's a good forward point. So I'll talk about one of my points. So Agario last time I was chatting about here, and I called it out to myself. I said, I've got a gaming.
Did you block
I've got a gaming problem. I didn't block it. It was just like I just never use it again.
Yeah.
So I was like, yep, and successfully never played it again. So I was like, this is wonderful. But what happened instead?
Taskopunk.
I'm gonna blame the Dinoverse, the guys over there.
Get
the Dapper
this,
Dinos. So the Dapper Dinos sent through a game. They were like, let's do a friendly game. It's called Smash Karts, if you want to go check it out. And I was like, that seems cool. Like, that'll be a fun little game to play with people. So I played it with them, and I played it 4 times. It was like 4 games.
Yeah.
I was like, cool. I didn't particularly realize that it had like levels and points, which is usually like most games do have that to keep you going. So I was like, whatever. And then I played it a couple more times for a couple more days.
So I think I asked Juan about this, and his framing of it was, this is research.
This is usefulness.
Because the Dapper Dinos are going to create something like this. I need to know how to play it.
Correct. So
etc.
The first step of always is when you're like, there's some usefulness here. I'm tricking myself. What happened was, though, the game actually, they did a couple more demos of what the game would look like. It's a little bit different. There's actually 2 different games, which I didn't even realize. But in any case, at that point, I'd already gotten hooked with Smash Karts. And in the same way that Agario got me, Smash Karts, to me, seemed like, I'll do it in between doing different things. I can see the levels. Like, I'll just play until, like... And this is the dangerous thing when you're playing a game. When it's like, I'll just play until I get to the next level, and then I'll stop. And I would successfully do that. But, of course, what happens? Because, at the beginning, you always level up really quickly. But then it started getting longer and longer, of course, because you have to play 10 games, 12 games, 15 games equivalent to get enough. Now, these games are 3 minutes, sure. But then it adds up, playing 10 games, 15 games, that's 30 minutes, that's 45 minutes, that's a bit. Now, I'm not I'm not saying bad things about the game, again, here, either. If you want to play
it's obviously a good game.
It's actually like a really fun game.
You.
It's a quick little game. The problem is always with gaming for me is that even if it's a 1-minute game, a 30-second game, whatever it may be, I will just almost compulsively keep on playing it almost in a striving of like, no, I'm going to win, and I'm going to continue winning in a competitive sense. Like, I do have that competitive streak about me, where I find it hard to pull away. And I've talked about this from Modern Warfare 3 and a few other things. Like, I just do that all the time. So, this is my call out to myself again, Juan, and for every more lives out there. From today, no more Smash Karts. So just before we got here, I played a little bit of Smash Karts just to kind of get it out of my system. And I went, I'm going to call myself out in this Meanderings. No more Smash Karts.
Are they going to miss you on the Discord? Like, did you play with people?
No, I never played with Discord guys again. Okay. Like, I never played with Discord guys again. It was just purely like on my own, just having a couple of games. And I even found myself, it got to a point where I must have played like a particular, couple of rounds so many times that there wasn't actually any real people I was playing against anymore. I was just
really?
playing as bots.
Oh, okay.
It was just bots the whole time.
Yeah.
And I was like, just winning repeatedly.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, of course, because they're bots. And I was like, nah, okay, I'm gonna stop now. I'm gonna stop now. This is enough. So that's my call out for myself.
Yeah.
I'm taking Smash Carts out of my top 5 of usefulness things that you should have in your life.
Gotcha.
Don't have that.
You know what?
I think actually. So the other one, actually, because we should get back to this point because you raised it, we didn't talk about it. Would you say that evolution would be something, or evolutionary thinking or ideas should be in the top 5 of things to know?
That's for me. Yeah. Yeah. I
Again, why? I'm like at a loss as to think what's the usefulness there for you.
That one, 90% of your behavior, probably even more, is unconscious, unthinking, and evolutionary knowledge theory, I think, is probably up there in terms of the most impactful of, or the best at explaining why you do things you do. So if you are finding yourself going out every single night, getting absolutely trashed, and trying to hook up with girls or something like that, it might be worth knowing, like, okay, why am I doing this? Like, what's underlying it? Like, most of these things they're just good underlying explanation factors with some sort of utility in the real world as well.
Is that evolution, though? Is that truly evolution, or is it part evolution, part how you get brought up?
So here's another one.
Or would you term that all under evolution?
No, of course it's, everything is roughly 50-50 with related to genetics versus environment. What was the name of this thing? I'll bring it up quickly because I thought this was a useful one to know as well. Blop, 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 blop. So I took this from the book, The Social Leap, as well. And it's called phenotypic indulgences.
Phenotypic PH?
PH, yes. And so basically these are things that mimic ancient pleasures without delivering adaptive outcomes. So the classic example I used a bunch of times in the book review was porn. Porn gives you the think, like, your brain gets hijacked and it's like, sexy woman or sexy man or sexy whatever it is that you're watching. Sexy furry.
Robot.
Yeah, sexy robot. Damn. Like, sexual opportunity right now. Do something about it. And so then, of course, what do? Well, you jack off and masturbate, and doesn't provide any adaptive outcomes. People might say, masturbators have a higher sperm count or something like that, or masturbators are blah, blah, blah. But I would say, I think most people would probably agree, like, it doesn't, watching porn, a tremendous amount of porn is not going to get you closer to having like an adaptive outcome, which will be more likely to put your genes in the next generation.
I struggled to find someone who could.
I think that's relatively uncontroversial.
Yeah.
And so if you have a porn addiction, I think knowing that might be, and so once again, it's mimicking an ancient pleasure, something deep in your brain, and it's not helping you. And so I think knowing that can maybe put a spotlight on being like, oh, what's happening here? Why are you struggling so much with this? And other people could put it down to different things like habit forming and stuff like that. But I think that evolutionary explanation for it is really helpful in understanding why you're doing something that you maybe don't want to do, and then you can fix that. Why was it that I struggled so much with women when I was in high school? A lot of understanding of sexual selection and status and things like that helped me to overcome that, to realize the steps that needed to be taken so that I could get women, etc., etc. So yeah, that's one. And for me, I just find it really interesting, the history of like animals and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Once again, it's just for me.
Yeah, I can't see the link. I think I can see the link, but there's what it seems to me like 7 layers of other ideas, thoughts, processes, and knowledge bases that go between that to evolution that I'm like, well, wouldn't they be the more important one then based on that? But I agree that it's super interesting to know like evolution and evolutional theory and the idea of why a lot of things that we do are the things that we do because of just we've been alive for humans have existed for a long time, so it's kind of like, well, there's just going to be predetermined things that we're wanting to be doing, and we're living in a world that changes way quicker than like evolution moves. So it's just like, you can look back at that to adapt to it. And just kind of go like, there's just things like psychology or habit forming or whatever you want to call about it, that it's like, well, wouldn't those be the actual topics? But again, I think I think when you posed the question of like a top 5, I wasn't I couldn't be super clear like, oh, what is that? Is like a topic? Is it a mindset? Is it like just psychology? So
okay. Could have been clear. I've been hijacking this session, so I'm just going to keep going with it. So I promised right at the start that I would talk about something else I'd been thinking of, which was status. And so this was also another little learning I got from this book, and once again, a good in. Maybe this would be why. I've read a bunch of books recently. This is one of the only books recently that have made me go like, I'm going to look at like a bunch of different things that are worthy of bringing up on the podcast, and probably even worthy of making into like monthly goals and things like that.
Yeah.
And this one in particular was, I've got like 2 different notes open, so I have to go back to this one. So status in playing the game. So it was talking in the book, there's sort of like the red queen theory from Matt Ridley, which is in the book Through the Looking Glass, Alice in Wonderland, and the red queen, she's always running, and they're always running in like this sort of globe type thing, but they're never getting to the edge of it. They're never getting anywhere. So as furious as you run, you never actually get anywhere, which is sort of an evolution. That's what happens. It's not about reaching an end goal. It's just about running as hard as you can so you don't get left behind and die out, essentially. And so this was linked to status. And so he was talking about, it's not about what you can actually do. It's not how much money you have. Jesus, like typhoon coming through here. It's not about how much money you have. It's about how much money you have in relation to your peer group, to your friends, and to the immediate people who would also be considered sexual partners. So if you're, the second richest man in the world, but you're in a room with the richest man in the world, your status is less. You're not as high. And so if there's a girl there who only cares about riches, you're nothing. It's like 0, 1. You're a 0, and that the other person, Elon Musk in this case, is number 1.
Yep.
And it got me thinking. I'm pretty anti-materialistic. I don't care for playing that game, but status is important. So how am I going to reconcile me wanting to like get a girl, to form a family and things like that, and also not playing the status game? It's like I should choose one or the other. You can't. You need to think about that if you want to get a girlfriend or a partner. You somewhat need to think about status. And so I was like, I haven't really thought about status for a while. Maybe I should be thinking about how I can maybe not improve my status, but like what status game am I willing to play? Which
Gotcha.
I'm obviously not willing to play the material one. So I'm not going to be the one with the Rolls Royce or the Bentley or whatever fancy car and showing off to impress someone in that game. But what games can I show off in that I'm the top of the pack sort of thing?
Yeah.
And so I need more thinking about that.
Yeah.
Another one was I've met this guy recently, and he was talking about, I was like, what are you up to? And he's just like, keep forgetting the name. It's like tenshin or something like that. And it was a Chinese word for essentially dropping out. And that's when you don't want to play part of the I don't know what you'd call it, standard 9 to 5 game anymore, and you completely drop out.
Yep.
And I was like, oh shit, man, that's exactly what I'm like. I'm basically that's me.
Yep.
But then thinking on it later, I was like, whoa, wait, there's a huge difference between him and me, which is that he was on Centrelink and he's on, like, please government give me money sort of thing, whereas I'm self-funded, like I'm self-sufficient. And I just went, I've been telling people like I dropped out a while ago.
Yeah.
Without them knowing that, okay, maybe he is, like maybe that's the implicit assumption.
Yeah.
And so status-wise, you know, in that contest, maybe I need to get better at emphasizing like it was an intentional dropout. His was intentional as well. But, you know, the difference is I'm not reliant on others for help in this case. Like, I'm self-reliant.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't know what's going through my mind. Because at least initially in my mind, I'm like, I don't think I've ever consciously played that game before. And I went, is that true? Like, is that actually true? So I'm trying to like just dig deeper, being like, is it?
See, and
like,
this might be why you don't need to think about it. You automatically do it. You automatically know how to do these things.
But I don't know if it's automatically doing it, nor is it automatically that I'm trying to raise my own status. And it's maybe what it gets me thinking is like that whole conversation about like, say, happiness. You know, the more you focus like, oh, I've got to be happy, then maybe perhaps the less happy you are. However, if you focus on other things, then happiness will come along with it because it's just like tangentially there because you're doing the stuff that you actually want to do. In a similar sense, I'm like, well, let's just say that status in the sense of having a good physique or being fit or anything like that. Now, it's not like I'm ever being consciously like, oh, I really need to be fit so I can be at the highest status level. It's like, no, I just really enjoy being fit and just doing fitness and having fun just because I truly enjoy it. And then it just comes with the fact that it has status with it. Now, but I never really thought like, oh, I've got to do this so I can get better status for it. I'm just trying to think if that applies everywhere. But what it did get me thinking, if someone was thinking about status, maybe perhaps the only things that I could say, like, because that word seems dirty to me. But then if I start extrapolating it to like, well, what if the status was like, you know, a family man, you know, or if it was like, you know, like really true, like a truth telling that you are, or like being very precise with your words or telling the truth. Okay, then perhaps that actually sounds a bit positive. Like if your status in that is high, and you could be perceived as like, yep, that person like tells the truth and can be trusted and can be accountable more than other people. Oh, also maybe that's like a really great trait that I want to be like go after. Now that's whether it's a opposite sex or it's like a friend or something like that. So I could see how maybe the status on that play could be a good thing. But I yeah, same. I would have to like think deeply more through that because that just it comes to my mind. But I go, surely there's some status game I've played at some point that's been conscious as opposed to like just unconscious.
I think you do it a lot, and it's just not front of mind. Even like the simple stuff. We're out with a group of friends. You're usually the one walking in front. That's sort of like status, head of the pack, leader type behavior, and you just do it implicitly. Like you don't think about it.
But I wonder if that. Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is like, you know, is it? I don't know. Like, is it valuable? Is it a positive thing? Let's just say we had a friend who like walked at the back of the pack all the time, or middle of the pack or whatever. And then they were like, okay, no, I'm going to increase my status. I'm going to walk at the front of the pack every single time. Like, I wonder if that sort of action
I can tell you it does.
It would work?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly the sort of things I had to internalize to get better with women. It's covering up for faults which you may not have, like, may not realize you have, but a showing in every interaction that you have.
Okay, fair.
So that's one I can speak to and say yes, like it does help. Like, and you do. It's not just the one thing. It's not just because you now walk at the front. It's like girls flock to you. Wrong.
Yeah, no. Everyone out there listening to me while they're like, all right, I'm going to walk at the front. That's it. They're going to come to me.
Kyron approved message right there.
Yeah. Oh, that would be, and we don't have to talk about it now, but yeah, that would be an interesting conversation of like, how would you consciously lift your status in a way that doesn't take away from the fact that you're fighting for that status. Because I agree with, I guess, what you're saying. There's probably all these unconscious things that a lot of people do that put them at like a place where they're seen like as a leader or a person that can be trusted or a person that can be confident, and they might be just doing it unconsciously, like absolutely unbeknownst to the fact that they're doing that. But if you're not like that, how do you get yourself to a position that you are like that?
Yeah.
In moving up the status game, is it better to be direct or non-direct? I'm not sure.
I'm going to think about that and bring it up in the next week's Meanderings, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Well, or the following Meanderings.
Next week's, like, the one... Next week's.
Next week, okay.
Next week's one.
Good. All right.
Juan doesn't know shit, people. I'm the one in charge here.
The master here knows. The master. All right, we're going to leave it at that for now.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone, this is a Value for Value podcast. So if you've been tuning in to our babble for 45-ish minutes now,
how much is that 45 minutes worth to you? And if you value it and value your own time, we would appreciate if some of that value was sent back to us. So we really like to receive boostergrams. That's our favorite way of receiving value, and because it's with Bitcoin, the hardest money out. And the way to do this is to go into a newpodcastapp.com, choose one which you like there with value, Fountain, Podfriend, CurioCaster, Podverse, Breeze, Castomatic, all fine, awesome apps. Chapter art images also showing up. There's lots of cool, fancy things going on. And so send us a message and we read those out on our musing session, which is live every Sunday. Other than that, really do hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. Current out.
That's it. Me more lights, one out.
Woo!